Good evening, everyone. You're probably wondering why Ricardo de Ostos is not standing here instead of myself. When Ricardo found the timing of this lecture was going to be today, it very, very sadly for Ricardo has coincided with an MRI appointment that he has been waiting for just months and months to look at his back. So Ricardo, in despair, came to me this afternoon and said, I cannot believe it. I've waited for months for this lecture to happen. Now, not only am I not going to be there, but I'm not going to be able to introduce Guy. So he asked me if I would, which is, I'd like to say, as great a privilege for me, Guy, as I hope it might have been for Ricardo, really. Guy Sibaud, whose practice in both France and São Paulo, called Triptyque, which I should say not only your practice, but with 3 others, has just produced some extraordinary work. I suspect all of you are sitting here probably because you know a little bit about it. First thing I said to Guy tonight was, are you going to show the creatures? And he said no. So there are no creatures, but as he then said to me is that every project is a creature in its own way. One project he is going to show that is probably my favorite project that they've done so far is a project called Harmonia 57, which I think is a, I mean, Guy, please don't take this the wrong way. I love messy buildings. And this is messy, and I love it. I love a messy building. I like a building that has quite a lot about it, a lot of different textures and qualities, and there's absolutely no doubt that this project is a marker in that field, and one that I absolutely admire. I think it grows out of an extraordinary lineage. Their sensitivity to the environment, and the sensitivity both seen and unseen, I think, in the work of theirs that I've looked at is really remarkable. I don't want to say much more, except I said to Guy, so he knows my kind of punchline, is that many years ago Frank Sinatra said that if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, and he meant New York City. He's surely mistaken in 2013. If you can make it in São Paulo, let me tell you, you can make it anywhere. For this young practice to emerge out of the São Paulo landscape, which is almost impossible, and to become seen internationally, I think is a tribute enough to the practice. But I think the work goes on to say much more than that. And with that, I'm going to pass it right over to you, Guy. Welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chris. It's really a huge, big honor for us to be there for that kind of small office we are. I will try to show four different projects with the same approach and based on a specific work with water. Water has been in our work a constant research during this year, and I'm not showing all the projects we've made, but only those who are linked with this special work with water. But I will try to come a little bit back with our background. I mean, this is important to explain in very, very simple words that we are a group of 4 partners, 3 French, 1 Brazilian girl, Gregory Brusquet, myself, Carolina Bueno, and Olivier Raffaelli. We actually met at the French École des Beaux-Arts in the 90s, and we have soon decided to go to Brazil, actually not only to do this, but also to face contemporary challenge, which are the city in Brazil. So that our first surprise was to discover not only huge cities and urban problems, but also fantastic and absolutely pure nature, really, really impressive and tropical, as you can imagine. So tropical and so pure that you may think in a certain way, and this is a work from one of my friends, a French artist, Jean-Pascal Flavien, working actually between Paris and São Paulo, who did this very, very beautiful drawing, and one of his installation in the middle that has been actually realized, but he drew this on others. I don't know how to say that, but you mean. So we really part interesting to face this nature, which is really, really so different from our culture of nature. I mean that the landscape here in Europe, for example, is that redesign that we actually are not in contact with the original proposal of the nature. And we were also prepared as the priest Sardinia to be eaten by the tropical aspects of this life. But still, the city in Brazil, and this is one of the most famous pictures of Rio de Janeiro, offer really a huge contrast between nature and architecture. Actually, this is maybe the most incredible contrast I've seen in my life, and those kind of scenes are quite relevant. All the problem, all the contrast, also social ones, hopefully. And you see the slam, this is the Rocinha in Rio de Janeiro attacking the Moro. Same, always with this kind of fight between nature and architecture. But also, remembering the story of this country, of Brazil, we cannot forget that in the early 60s, Juscelino Kubitschek, which was the former president of Brazil, elected in 55 and till 60, has decided to move the capital of Brazil to Brasilia and to build an entire new city on the base of a modern project, which was at this time a Brazilian, typically modern project. And that was a time where the Brazilian architecture was on the top of the world, for sure. And then you had this kind of scene, Lucio Costa, with the president looking at the maps in the middle of a desert, thinking about the future city. At this time also, Jean-Paul Belmondo and some scene of French movies and also were shooted during the construction of Brasilia, showing to us how glamorous the Brazilian scene was at this time. But coming back to reality, we discovered that from the plane and coming to São Paulo, a very, very intense and I'm forgetting my name, a mineral soup. This is something really impressive that doesn't show exactly the reality of São Paulo. Actually, São Paulo is much more surrounded by nature, but you know, arriving by plane, you have this impressive picture of a seriality of same buildings, one behind the other. Also, facing all the problems, maybe something like 33% of the population is living in slum, informal habitation with huge and very, very huge problem of pollution. This kind of smog you can see most part of the time in São Paulo, even if it's raining during summertime almost once a day. But still we wanted to keep this city changer attitude. And for the first big project or a realized project we had, we were given a plot, Rua Harmonia, in São Paulo, a very specific neighborhood with a lot of galleries, a very dynamic context, but suffering a very huge and very intense transformation in terms of scale. As you can see, I don't think I have something to show you, but anyway, you can see the towers on top of the picture, and small or 2 floors, 3 floors construction next to very big towers. So we had also to integrate it. The big problem of that kind of area, but also this is the case of the entire city, is to face a huge and frequent tropical rains that are really, the film is not the movie is not working actually, but this is a scene that you can testify maybe 2 or 3 times each summertime. And this is a very, very interesting aspect as far as if you consider that São Paulo has forgotten his topography or maybe his geography, the weather and the rain still are working and showing that the power of nature. Other example is the strange and really the importance of nature in São Paulo, when you can see this kind of contrast between walls, for example, and passing by tree, or also nature attacking cement and concrete and walls and transforming the proper material into a quite living or organic skin. This is other example of what we call entropy, where the nature is literally attacking the materials, for example, this fence, and observing it in a certain way. Other big example, those where, and maybe the climax of this kind of manifestation is an abandoned project for an hotel in Rio de Janeiro, but this is not a very, very, very old one, maybe 15 years ago. Here you can see really, and pretty much, that it gives the impression that the nature always is able to reverse the game, always is able to eat the architecture. For its sides, the architecture is still conceived like a manufactured product, perfect, brand new, and deliver new, but also condemned to decadence in a certain way. So we were really and likely interested in create some other story with our project and integrating maybe the question of time, the question of growing nature, evading nature in a single story. This is the plot. You can see the white line surrounding our plot. It's a kind of, it's a typical plot of São Paulo, 10 meters by 50. Where really we had to find the possibility to organize 6 units of artistic ateliers, studios, as a residence. In front of our plot, we discovered that, and this was really in the beginning of our stay in Brazil. That means the power of water, and that was our really point, a starting point at the same time. The water, you know, passing through the plot and causing flooding. So we have started to think about a dynamic system involving the rain, the storage, filtering, pumping, and sprinkling in a single story. And the story and the result will be the scheme. So we really started to experiment something about the scheme of the building as a real scheme, as a real organic scheme, with not a regular pattern of holes, but something that will not necessarily produce a perfect green wall, as you can see, but also a very, very dynamic and a variety of nature. We found these cereal plants called epiphytic plants, which are known for not needing, they are not needing actually earth for the vegetable grossness. So you can find and you can imagine to put it in the hole, and these plants, these kind of plants that exist in the nature, are suitable for our project. So those are the first tests of it in a very, very small scale, and we've made a several tests with the landscape designer, working with a mix of cement, mineral elements, and also a PVC sprinkling system, very simple one, very low-tech one, which was exactly our goal at the beginning, as far as the budget of the building always has been very, very limited. Here you can see the building before the plans and the role that we wanted to give for the PVC plumbing, forming actually a kind of moderature, architectural moderature of the building, and also participating, by the way, of the railing, for example, system or other elements important for the building. This is the main facade of the building from the street, closed, but showing us another system we had to improve for the project, which was the shading system. Actually, in a very simple way, we use penis pieces of wood to solve it with a very simple movement and a mechanism used for car doors and parking doors. This is the organization for plants, but this is not really interesting today, maybe for the thematics of the lecture. So only to remember, we had this plot with 10 meters on that dimension and 50. So we had to organize 2 volumes of 1 of 3 or 1 of 4 units with a very simple square in the middle, linking the project with the street. And we can see it working when the door is open. You have this light, very, very light connection from the street to the center of the plot. You can also notice the storage of the water and the path of the pipes, which are actually galvanized pipes, very simple one also. And the cube here is the entrance of the parking area. So we had to put the zero level of the building at 1 meter, so that the water is going almost entering into the building during the summertime. But we are actually capturing this water on storage, which are based in the basement, and then pumping it in this storage, which are also filtering, and put it in the upper slab. And afterwards, I will show you in a very simple exchange of water spreading afterwards. This is the main, I don't know why I did that. This is the main piece of the project, where the staircase stands also, which is a common area for the artists during the work. But you can see here the building in 2 different times, and a very interesting one, when the system is working and when it's not. So 4 or 5 times per day, depends of season, depends of humidity. We have a series of captures, and we are able to control actually the humidity of the wall. But once again, we are working with very, very simple materials, materials which are not actually used for architectural purpose, but much more industrial purpose. This is PVC1, galvanized and something. But this kind of cloud is working 5 times a day, and it's also working for cooling the building, actually. A close, where you can see those pictures been taken maybe 6 months after the delivering of the building. Today the building is quite different, but you can see plants, but also moisture or forms, a sort of organic life, quite different depending on the site, depending on the orientation you have. And also we work with our landscape designer with a sort of plant that can attract some animals like this borboleta papillons. How do you say in English? Papillon. I don't know. Or repulsing also mosquitoes for the people inside the building. Other views of the building, which is almost a plant, and some critical corners of it where we really wanted to show every kind of circuit, every kind of elements acting here. The staircase and other views. You can see that some parts are plants, other are moisture or form. This is quite interesting. You have an unfinished building, an imperfect building actually living. The internal space is treated quite different. We use smooth materials to make maximum contrast from inside to outside. And then the building in its environment, which is actually a symmetry above, and you can see the recent towers growing, and here the neighborhood like it is today. The second project is a media library in France, and this project will be built hopefully within 2 years. We actually have some budget restrictions in France, as you may know. So we are not pretty sure that this project will be built, but it's almost ready in terms of drawings and everything. But we actually don't know. So we were given a square, a central square, inside a small town called Orny. Orny seems to be a small village from this picture, but this is also surrounded by the Parisian suburbs. We are talking about 15 kilometers away from the center of Paris, and actually the media library will be used by the region, but still belonging to this quite French typical village. The city hall, for example, is that beautiful castle inside a very huge park and with a natural pond, ducks and every kind of birds. So we thought at the beginning, as you can see on the picture, there is a huge train line cutting in two parts this small city, and the city hall and most of the programs, of public programs, stand above the line. So we were walking, you can see the blue square on that side. So we have decided, and we started with this very simple section, which is actually a drawing starting from the city hall and the natural pond, and then right in the middle the railway station and railway line. We started to create a new layer for the city, a line with the roof and the train line, but also corresponding to the natural pond of the library. This would be a wet slab, using also a cycle of water and organizing a building which will be at the same time a fountain building, but also an experimental system for cooling or heating the building, in addition to others. So we have decided to create the most simple figure of architecture for a village square, a central square of a village, which could be a market warehouse like it was in France in the past. That means a simple slab with a very simple series of columns with a minimum definition of map of plans. I mean a flexible layout and a very flexible spaces. As far as we were really worried about the future of the media library. We all know that this kind of program today are not matching exactly with the reality of the need of the population, and we actually don't know what will be the future of this kind of media library. They're constructing a lot of it in France. I mean, I don't know exactly the number, but this is for sure something that will have to be retrofit in a very short range of time. So we really wanted to work with a very simple space and determinate space. Also, using geothermal water, we started to think about this cycle of water from the top of the building, that means the upper slab, which is the cover of the lecture room, the main slab, which is the cover of the main program, and the square level with other basins. So this is an experimental drawing for an experimental model we did 3 years ago for the LFA. Ricardo Di Hostos has invited us 3 years ago to participate of a small exhibition at the Brazilian embassy, and we did that kind of model using water and slab, only to test some effect. But the final building is that one, as you can see, and the different level of water shown, and at the same time a building that respects the scale of the place and open on the 4 sides with glass. Here is a schematic technical system that we use with our engineers to start this experimentation. That means, in very simple way, we've got a constant tempered water at 12 degrees on the ground, -10, and we are using actually a heat exchanger to cool in summertime, or to heat the slab on winter time. That is to say that we are improving the excuse me, I will go to the exact terms, the thermical property of the slab, giving it or improving its inertia. I mean, and this is a very simple problem, and we are trying to test it in large scale and see afterwards what are the exact effects of it, as far as this is a very, very experimental work, and there is no work ready about that, but for sure an interesting one. So this is the simple organization in plan. You can see the main volumes with its patio right in the center, and we use very light framing, very light walls to organize this space. And this is the lecture room that is exactly at the level of the upper slab, and which would be a very, very quiet room with sound of waters, and you can see it on the model. This model gives us a good impression of what kind of volumetry we have inside the square. And this another model showing us the upper slab with the lecture room. The entrance with the marquise, quite open and free. So it goes to the third one, which is also a competition that we didn't won, but also organize around a concept using water. And I don't know if you have heard of this competition. I think Su Fujimoto won it, actually. But the subject was this square, mostly 1 kilometer of the river, of the Sava River, which is exactly in front of the historic center of Belgrade. A very, very interesting plot with many problems we had to solve, and also because this area used to be an industrial harbor, and is not any longer, and this is a very interesting free area. What you can see at the triangle above is an old fortress, really, really beautiful and really interesting. This place has always been interesting for in the history of Belgrade, just because at the confluence of the Danube, coming from Germany, and the Sava River, coming from the other side. So the historic center of the city always has been articulated here. And then you have here another view of the historic center, the touristic harbor, and our plot, which is called Beton Ala, a very, very simple concrete warehouse that has to be transformed. So we try to simplify, but also to put what the challenges are for this project. That means that we had several parts working apart with no connection in between. That means the fortress is very nice and it works well, but is not connected with the city, historic city level, which has a very, very intense traffic, but also the river and the boats, the proper touristic boats and or commercial boats are not linked. So we thought about a new layer also linking the plus 30-meter fortress to the river, and doing so, the city will gain an extra level that will organize all the fluxes. This upper level has been the object of another cycle of water we had imagined. That is to say, pump or bring the water of the Sava River to the top of the slab, filtering it, transforming it, and use it on the city level to organize our urban design. Doing so, we are also creating connections for pedestrians, for example, but also other connections for the public transportation. And from this lab to the plaza level, we had organized all the program in a very stacking way, very, very simple one, starting with the exhibition space, which is the main one and which was actually the best part of the programmation, but also conference room and commercial programs. Those are the actual diagrams of the competition, showing all the complexity of connections, public transportation, pedestrian walks, and so on, but also how we started to compose a building with this goal to retreat water and use it for urban design. So, as you can see, the building has a very, very huge wheel, which is a very important element of it. And we will see it on the 3D model, transforming this kind of building also in a kind of living plant, you know, starting to organize transport of water in people and producing energy, recycling water. Those are thematics that we really want to work with, and we are really interested. But also, you can see that we use water, very, very thin layer of water to organize also all the urban design, and you can see it on the plan. This also, but you can see that they are not real streets, but it's a kind of layer, pedestrian layer above a wet surface. But also the tramway is passing, you know, right in the middle of the complex. But you have also funicular climbing, as you can see, many elements mixed in these sections. This is a view I really like, showing a little bit the old Beton Ala, which is a concrete warehouse, but also the new plaza above it, and this old complex with the big wheel, the funicular, the bridges going to the fortress you can see on the background, and the opposite, which is the Belvedere that the city gained, which is absolutely linked with the Sava River, with the same reflex and the same cores, and which could be a very new kind of equipment for the city. This is a small model of the complex. And at least another project, this time in Brazil and built, which is the station. The station is a cultural center that we were ordered by the Red Bull company. Red Bull company is doing such things all over the world. They are creating spaces for art in a very private manner, but doing well and working well actually, which are not only museum or exhibition space, but also space where the art is produced. So that this is not only art, I mean plastic art. We are talking about music, plastic art, movies, and everything. And they found a very interesting building, which is that one, and which used to be an electric plant right in the middle of the city. From the 30s, actually a classified building with a beautiful facade, and standing right in the middle of huge amounts of highways and infrastructures, bridge, pedestrian bridge, bus station and everything, but standing right in the middle of the very center of São Paulo, historical center. I mean, we are quite close from the city hall, and all the buildings surrounding our station are in some way historical, despite the fact that they are all also quite, how do you say that, part of the modern architectural history of Brazil, which is quite rational. I mean, and giving this impression of concrete soup, concrete jungle surrounding the building. So this view is interesting just because on top of the roof, as you can see, we have a small fountain, and this fountain works exactly as our media library is supposed to function, as far as the electric plants produce a lot of heat. They use this very, very simple device to cool the building, that it only spreads some cold water at different level and working like this. So we really were interested in keeping that kind of device, obviously, and retrofit it and insert it into the project. But also because the spaces of internal spaces of the building were that beautiful in terms of light, windows, structure, materials, but also paintings, that we have decided to not to spare in a certain way the building and focus on the functions and the equipment of the building, but also start to think about a very contemporary intervention visible from outside, that will be a very simple leaf of a metallic leaf, offering an extra space for this building, that is to say a protected space or an extra space to expose, but also a space to see the city, or a space to project movies or installation to the building. Also, a device to capture water and use it for the fountain, but also for other purpose inside the building. So on that model, which is a study model, where you can see the fountain, but also the platform that we call, which is a very thin platform of steel, organizing the new circulation of the building as far as the fire department told us to rethink about it. And we plug it on the facade in a very violent way, but also had to solve a structural problem, that is that the upper slab of the building was not able to support a lot of weight. So we had really to establish a new static condition for the platform, and started to work with this huge pillar and huge metallic pillar that relieve actually the weight of the platform and goes to the ground, and to solve this static problem. Other view of the platform. And now internal space, this is a 3D simulation. We have decided only to clean the space of the plant, but trying to insert some new elements, which are in that case the musical studio, and which are made of concrete, respecting the sound designer project, which was quite complicated, but giving to this element a very, very complex geometry, and offering also in between space that will be able to be used by the artists in residence, for example, for relaxing or doing what they want, and assuming also the difference between the antique building, which was made of concrete also, and the new structure. Those are plans showing more or less the shape of this building. I won't explain it in a very precise way. And those are the picture after demolition. As you can see, really the space is interesting. This is the main gallery where the studio recording will stand, and actually stand. That building has opened past week. And I have already some picture of the opening in function. And this is the main gallery for exhibition, but also shows and other workshops. This is the building, the opening, with, as you can see, the platform realized with the column, everything in metallic. Here is the entrance with the ticket center, and the realization of the big column. The main galleries with very simple treatment and space, and then here the in-between space that show and give another impression of the city skyline of the Praça da Bandeira. And that's it.
Do you want to ask some questions to Guy? Do you want to? Questions. This always becomes an obligation, right? I feel like I have to start you off in a way. But so Guy, I will actually. Have you got one? Oh, wait, do I have to talk into that? No, right. Is there a question back there? Yeah, that's great. Wow. Wait, but I have to carry this back to you. Right.
I'm curious to hear how you decided to open your office in Brazil.
No, actually, I still don't know why. But this is something that happened. I mean, we've made a small trip before of all, only to experiment and feel what Brazil was. And actually, we we did some very, very good contact with the client, and he gave us our first project, and afterwards we stayed. And now I'm quite French Brazilian. I actually don't know. My wife is Brazilian. My son is French Brazilian, and I'm really dividing my time between the two countries. But this is something really interesting. But as I said at the beginning, the main part is that we really had to go out from Europe. I mean, we felt not very comfortable with the conversation, with the problematics we had here between history, center of the cities, suburbs, or any kind of determination due to historical condition. But we really wanted to face the new city, the generic city. So that São Paulo was a perfect goal, but we started with Rio de Janeiro, which is also a perfect goal in that matter.
I've got a question. Is it, as an environment to work, is it in Brazil? Sorry, yeah. So is Brazil as an environment for an architecture company, is it somehow less or more restrictive in terms of your building regulations, and does it allow for a better canvas for let's say research projects like your bland walls and so on?
No, actually, it's easier to experiment in Brazil, as you have seen. The Harmonia 57, for example, I mean, quite impossible to be built here for many reasons. But we try to reproduce this, for example, for the Oni Media Library, which is following exactly the French norms, which are not the worst, but they are quite complicated, and we did it. So, I mean, what is good in Brazil is really the feeling that you really can experiment something, but this is much more a question of climate. This is only because, for example, in São Paulo, you've got a quite regular temperature all year long, something like between, let's say, 15 and 30 degrees, that allows you not to protect your building against, for example, cold. I mean, I have, and many people in São Paulo that doesn't have any kind of heating systems, nor they have AC systems. I mean, this is quite peculiar. I mean, you cannot reproduce it, but as you saw it maybe in the picture, this is a country where you can say that a window is an hole in the middle of a wall. This is only that. You can manage a window, maybe only a piece of glass inside the wall. Here you have several questions to be solved before that, and for sure this is a good country to go and experiment as a young architect, but this is not that easy to get the work. I'm not saying that.
Thanks.
Hello, I was just wondering, Brazil is a large country, so I was wondering your elements of nature, water, plants, how the parameters have changed across Brazil in different cities that you've built. The landscapes are very different. Yeah.
Excuse me, I didn't get it.
No, how have you have you looked at different changing parameters of the water and the plants in different cities in Brazil that you've built in? How are they different?
No, I mean, the tropical condition is something that is maybe applicable, maybe not where Ricardo is is living, which is or from, which is Belo Horizonte, but you have all the littoral of Brazil that is submitted exactly, I mean, in different ways, with huge differences between north and south, but with same characteristics. I mean, this is quite, and this is exactly why the traditional modern architecture in Brazil has adopt very, very, very soon, I mean 30 or maybe 40 years ago, some kind of practical solution to protect themselves against the sun, for example, or to improve natural ventilation inside the buildings. As far as they were able to solve maybe 90% of the problems with simple systems, still working till now in some buildings, for example, in São Paulo.
Guy, I have a question. Your buildings have muscle, yeah, I mean muscle. But they also, each of them I noticed at the beginning, besides for the Harmonia project, each of them began with a kind of drawing that, let's say, emphasized levitation. Or kind of, yeah, levitation, really. Obvious connections to Yona Friedman and others of the past. And I guess I would say, maybe it's a kind of very, very broad question, but how you imagine taking that tradition, let's say from maybe the 60s or 70s, and moving it forward now into the 21st century. And certainly the way, I mean, what intrigued me is the drawings are so incredibly light, but the buildings then have muscle, and I like the juxtaposition between the two. And I guess for me it's a kind of question of how that language develops from the drawing, which has an airiness, to the building, which I would say still retains an airiness as well, but at the same time has a strength and a physicality about itself.
Yeah, this is absolutely true, that even more in cities like São Paulo, the experience of the flight, for example, the picture I saw you, and the impression that gives the city, which is quite an incredible city made of millions of towers, which could have been a special city, for example, is absolutely not filled on the ground. I mean, and we were really interested in create some special event to give back this kind of impression and verticalize in a certain way the experience of the city, and work with very, very light and simple devices, which are quite always using a precarious stability. We are not using the figure of stability. We do like the system that gives the impression that it will fall in 2 minutes. So that really only that kind of events may bring the people on the upper floor, which is a new experience of the city, and insisting always on the importance of the fifth facade, which is always acting, but not very, very used in, for example, in São Paulo. São Paulo is offering a lot of view from the top to the ground, but almost never you've got something interesting happening there. So we are really quite influenced by that.
Any other questions? Guy, thank you very, very much. Yeah? Thank you very much.